Kia ora. Blessed are moments found where worry and weariness fade from the foreground, and a mist-like calm settles, and we are at rest. Blessed are we who lay under the yellowing ginkgo, the hard weight gone this day, free now to pray and think so, free to be restored. The most memorable prayers are poems. Our memories enjoy the cues of alliteration, rhyme, anaphora. It's blessed are we, blessed are we. Poems dance with our experiences and emotions. They're not a well-reasoned argument, and as such, they are much better pointers to the mystery we name as God. Michael Leunig's Winter Prayer, our first reading today, begins with a little frog and winter's fog, then segues into the metaphor of holy mist, playing on holy mystery. Holy mist as an image of divine gentle healing. And the third stanza of the poem names the central quality of this holy mist as love. Then, like with all healing, it encourages us to respond with stillness, forgiveness, and adoring or honouring the softer, simpler world within ourselves. This poem of Leunig's doesn't use words like God or spirit. But let's be clear, this poem is simply using different language that non-religious people might hear and welcome, to talk about God and spirit. The most memorable theology is story, like the prodigal sons and the Good Samaritan. Stories that don't have a God character, nor is God behind the scenes pulling the strings. Indeed, like Leunig, one could posit that the storyteller was using non-religious language that ordinary people might hear and welcome. In these two well-known parables, it is the interactions between the characters that embody what we could call God. God, I would suggest, is best thought of as the strings or the threads that connect us one to another, along which goodness can travel. In my book, Pinches of Wisdom, there is a story of me after a wet walk in the Hunua Ranges with 2 dogs, driving to a local store to get a coffee. I've been there before, and the coffee for a general store was surprisingly good. But as I entered the open door, I noticed the lights weren't on, and no one seemed to be about. Hesitantly, I called out, "Hello?" And the elderly proprietor, who I guess his family originated from India, called back, "Don't worry about us. We're just making love back here." Then his wife, fellow proprietor, sheepishly moved her head forward into the doorway light, and with a bit of a smile looked at me. He then quickly explained the power outage, said they can still take cash, but can't make coffee, which travelling only with cards did me no good. So I retreated outside, accompanied by the memory of their grins. Getting back in the car, I paused for a moment and allowed the delightful aroma of their humour to filter through my rain-soaked exterior, and I let out a chuckle. And as I drove down the road, I realised they'd given me much more than any warm caffeine could. God does not appear in this story, nor do words like spirituality and prayer. But there is a cup of something very good here. Think of the couple at the store. With a power outage, they were losing money. They didn't get any from me, nor from the guy who was pulling in for gas when I left. They could be grumpy with the power company, or the storm, or the government, as people do. But this elderly couple made a different choice, and attitude is a choice. They chose to meet their bad luck with some risky humour and good cheer. They laughed, probably at my surprised look. They smiled, and the smile stayed with me, and is still with me. I would suggest to you that this humour the smile shared is like a thread of goodness that now connects me and this couple. And there are many other people, both inside and outside churches, who are threading other acts of goodness every day. Little kindnesses, little generosities, little encouragements, hundreds, thousands, millions of tiny invisible threads of goodness. Barbara Brown Taylor, the renowned American Episcopalian author and academic, has written a book called The Luminous Web, Essays on Science and Religion. Quantum physics, and in particular entanglement theory, suggests that everything in life, molecules, particles, subatomic particles, everything is interconnected. We're all caught up in an infinite web of relationships. This luminous web stretches endlessly across the universe. A plucking of the web in a singular place reverberates throughout the entire web. All of life is a part of it. For Taylor, God is revealed in this interconnecting web that links us all together. Indeed, God is the energy of unification that entangles us. Taylor thinks of God as infinite energy and love, as presence and as mystery. I like this idea of a luminous web of interconnection. I think the mystics of old, Eckhart, Hildegard, and others, would resonate. I like too the idea of how one action, good, bad, or indifferent, vibrates a strand in the web and thus creates consequences. Just as one act of good cheer on a wild Hunua morning creates a smile in my heart and now, years later, makes a smile on many of your faces. In the Gospel we call John, there is very little history about Jesus. All the unique stories it contains didn't literally happen. But there's lots of history about the community that interpreted Jesus for their time and day, that is, the late 1st and early 2nd century. And as such, it is an encouragement for the community of St. Luke, or whatever community you're part of, to interpret Jesus for our time and day. The John community made up poems, like Jesus is the light of the world and Father and I are one. And stories like the threatened stoning of an adulterous woman, like Jesus washing his disciples' feet. They made up these to not only illustrate faith in action, but to encourage us to do likewise. That is, and to encourage us to make up poems and stories about our faith too. A brief word about the Gospel reading today and last Sunday. When all the language and meaning is deciphered by scholars, and remember the poetry was first written in Greek, it simply boils down to this. If you in the John community want to see God, to see Jesus after he's died, then you will find both in the acts and presence of love in the community, in your community. Susan Adams talked last week about what this love looks like. And this love will usher you into a mysterious oneness, a divine entanglement. You, singular and plural, in God and God in you. Just as Jesus was in God and God in Jesus. Such divine entanglement is not an external or public spectacle, like a theophany on Mount Sinai or a magnificent temple. It is seen as love for one another. Divine revelation is not a spectacle, but a practice. And our task today, just as it was for the community of St. John, is to figure out what such loving entanglement looks like in practice, how to do it, and how to encourage one another to do it. So I write stories about goodness and encourage connections. I write poems, particularly blessings. For I found that theology is best expressed in liturgy, prayer and song, and liturgy is best expressed in poetry. John Caputo, the American philosopher, calls this theopoetics. Recently, as you may have noticed, church or Facebook, I've taken to writing affirmations of faith. Growing up with creeds has made me wary of them. Or to be more precise, wary of asking everyone to join in repeating words and theology we don't understand, let alone believe, let alone feel committed to. So I've taken a sabbatical from creeds for a couple of decades and haven't missed them. But last year, after I visited Iona and stayed at the Abbey for a week, I reconsidered this. Iona is quite unusual in that it's a church community whose liturgical DNA is curiosity and innovation, rather than simply tradition and repetition. They use affirmations of faith, not to repeat what people believed in the past, though there can be a bit of that, but to find language to affirm and thus encourage what faith looks like in practice today. So here's one I've written that summarizes what I've been trying to say. I believe we were created for love, to give and receive love, to build trust and friendships, to encourage and empower people, and form communities of the same. I believe we were created to care for the vulnerable, support the weakened, and dismantle the structures of injustice, discrimination, and other wrongs, so that all may share in life's blessings. I believe that love and care are the heart song of the earth, that all creatures, lands and waters long for. This song is of connection and hope, and weaves us together as home. In this I find peace. In this I find justice. In this I find joy. In this I find God. In this I believe. Blessings to you this week.